I'm out here committing these crimes now. Cause I murder fucking beats, I'm trying to shine now. Let's get it. Fans told me that I never dropped. A couple friends told me I was never.
Hello and welcome to the Fantasy Gurus, and today we're going to be doing a top 10 players for the 2020 season in PPR. So, for first, my number 10 player is Mike Evans. My reason for him being number 10 is he's almost a guaranteed 1,000-yard receiver, even with Chris Godwin taking some of his sharing of his snaps. He gets a lot of deep ball looks with 17 yards a catch, and he had 30, which is the second most out of all receivers.
My number 10 is Alvin Kamara. He had 248 points this year. He missed 2 games. Breeze was also hurt for 6 games. So, I mean, if you think about it, he's going to get more points if Breeze is healthy because he throws the ball to the backfield to his running backs a lot more. Kamara had 1 game while Breeze was gone. He had 1 good game. That was pretty much it. He scored 37 points. The rest of the games were like 10 to 11 to 15. If Drew Brees is healthy, he's a top 5 RB. He had 81 receptions still this year, which is pretty good. That's second, I think, to only Christian McCaffrey. And he scored 4 TDs in the last 2 games, so he looks pretty promising to a good year next year.
Okay, moving on to number 9. My number 9 was DeAndre Hopkins. He had the second most receptions tied second most to someone else. He's still a top-tier receiver, even with a kind of a bust year. He has a really good quarterback throwing him the ball. And he has over 1,000 receiving yards still, even with his not as good a year as he used to be. And he has 100% snap share, so he's always on the field.
All right. My number 9 is Tyreek Hill. He missed 4 games and got hurt in 2 games early in the first quarter, so he had like 2 targets the whole time. He scored over 10 points in every game he played in the whole game and finished the game. He is very dangerous and can give you 30 points any week. Just a matter of what happens. This year, actually, his leading target was 19. Early last year, I'd say he was a boomer bust guy, and he could get 10 to 8 targets or 1 to 2. So, and this year, he was really consistent. He had pretty much 10 points every time he played the whole game. And I think if he doesn't get hurt next year, he'll be a very good wide receiver.
So number 8, my number 8 is Nick Chubb. He had the second most rushing yards in the league with 1,494 rushing yards, and he had the second most carries. He averaged 5 yards a carry, and what also sets him apart is he evaded 96 tackles, so he'll be able to get into space and make his own moves and get more yards than most people would. Also, if Kareem Hunt does leave, it'll just make his value go up.
My number 8 is DeAndre Hopkins. He had 268 points the whole season. He didn't play week 17, so it means people who passed him up at the end or could not have passed him up if it was only 16 games. It wasn't it was a down year. He had 3 games under 10 points, which I kind of look at, you want consistent wide receivers. But every game, he had more than 8 targets, except for one time, and the other time it was 7. Houston they were good, but they were streaky this year, so they had really good games and really bad games. So I think next year, if they're more consistent, you can expect them to be really good. But anyway, you're getting a nice solid floor of a really good receiver going into next year.
At number 7, I have Ezekiel Elliott. He's been an 1,000-yard rusher consistently every year that he's been in the league. This year, he had 12 rushing touchdowns, 54 receptions. He also had the second most carries in the league, and is looking to get more next season with maybe their offense changing up since Jason Garrett just got fired.
So my number 7 is Chris Godwin. He had 276 points this year. He was the second wide receiver, and he was hurt the last 2 games. He had 2 games under 10 points. And if Jameis Winston comes back, he's a very valuable player because they're just going to throw the ball all the time. Jameis Winston's going to throw for a lot of yards, but he's going to throw for a lot of picks and a lot of touchdowns. You know that's a given. As long as he doesn't get benched, you're going to have a pretty good, wide receiver. And even he had 9 touchdowns this year. Even with Mike Evans on the field, he still had a 22% target share. That means the passes were thrown at him 22% of the time. He's 25th in the league with that. And Mike Evans had a 23% target share, but he had 30 deep balls. So, that's a lower success rate. So, you can live with that. And then Godwin had 9 red zone targets, which is number 1. It's 9 red zone targets, but he he was number 1 in red zone yards after catch.
Going on to number 6. My number 6 is Tyreek Hill, because he's one of the most versatile receivers or players in the NFL. And he has a young MVP quarterback to throw him the ball. Even with his 12 games played, he had 58 receptions, 860 yards, and 7 touchdowns. And I think he just can improve. I don't see him going down anytime soon.
My number 6 is Julio Jones. He was number 3 wide receiver. He had 274 points. He had 2 games under 10. It was another down year for Julio. I think most of the wide receivers had down years. Matt Ryan had a down year too. He was hurt in a couple games. They just were not very good at the beginning of the year. He did have 79 points the last 3 games, which is interesting to see because he's pretty good. He's getting older in his career. Same thing with Matt Ryan. So I think it'll be interesting to see if they change their coaching staff, like offensive coordinator, defense coordinator for next year, because they're keeping Dan Quinn. But I think the problem is their defense and offense are not very good, so they need new coaches to fix that up. And then the only problem for him is touchdowns, because he only had 6 this year, and I don't think he had a touchdown from like week 5 to week 16. There was no touchdowns at all.
Moving on to the top 5, my number 5 is Derrick Henry, which may surprise some people, but he led the league in rushing yards and tied first in rushing touchdowns. He also, with a struggling quarterback position, he should get more volume than most running backs will.
Okay, my number 5 is Dalvin Cook. He had 294 points scored, 13 points or more in every game until he got hurt, week 15. He had 15 receptions, no receiving touchdowns, which is kind of weird. But if he's healthy, he's one of the best running backs in the league. And he didn't score a touchdown in 2 games, so that means you're getting a touchdown pretty much in every game he plays. So I think you can take the consistency there. And he's a consistent RB. He's a top 5 RB. So you can take that floor and consistency pretty. I think anybody would want that on their team.
Okay, number 4, I have Saquon Barkley. He had not a really good season this year, even with 1,000 yards rushing. He had to fight an ankle sprain pretty much all season. He played well. It seemed like he was injured while he was playing for most of the game. But in week 16, he had a really big game, which showed that he can still has potential and has a high ceiling.
It was week 15.
It was week 15, sorry. And so yeah, he still reached 1,000 yards even with his injury. We're fighting through that, and that's why he's number 4.
My number 4 is Ezekiel Elliott. Wait, no, you said Saquon Barkley. He had big week 15 and 16.
Okay, yeah, both. He had a good week 16 and 15.
All right, mine's 4 is Ezekiel Elliott. He had 1 game under 13 points, so that's pretty consistent. I mean, that's pretty much as good as Dalvin Cook. He's a workhorse. He got 311 points this year. Jason Garrett just got fired, so I think they can use him a lot better. I mean, they passed the ball so much at the beginning of the year. I mean, he was not getting the carries, or not really, just he wasn't getting the holes and the plays necessary for him to get a lot of yards. And you saw him at the end of the year. I mean, I don't think he had a very good year this year, but he was the 3rd best running back this year. I mean, you can basically count on him to be a top 3 running back every year. I mean, he's finished top 5 probably every year, and probably 3 out of 4 years he's been top 3.
Number 3, I have Dalvin Cook, because the Vikings have the run game is super good in their offensive scheme. He had 1,100 yards rushing, even with his injury at the end of the year, which wasn't that big. It didn't play that big a role. But if he stays healthy, he'll definitely be a good running back. He had 58 receptions, so even in PPR, he'll get 58 extra points or something like that with his receptions. 13 rushing touchdowns, which is that's almost every game. So if he stays healthy, he's going to be a top 3 running back.
My number 3 is Michael Thomas. He had 1 game under 7, and it was in week 16 or week 17, so that didn't really matter. He was number 1 wide receiver. He scored 98 more points than the next wide receiver. Doesn't really matter. That's a lot more than anyone else. He was 2nd best skill position player this year in fantasy. He scored 92 fantasy points in the playoffs. I mean, he's pretty consensus that he's a really good player. So I put him on 3, and I'll get to why he's there on my next one.
Number 2, I had Michael Thomas. As he said before, he had more receiving yards than the number 2 guy by 400. So, I mean, he had like 1,700 something. And the next guy up at 1,300. He had the most receptions this year. I think he broke the record for receptions in a single season. And he's still young, so he's time to improve. The only problem I see with him is maybe the quarterback, but I think he'll still be fine. I don't see Drew Brees retiring this year, so yeah, that's why he's the number 2.
My number 2 is Saquon Barkley. He had a down year, but he still scored 244 points. Even with him being hurt 3 games, he scored 97 points in the last 3 games. I mean, you take that every time in the playoffs. I think having a good running back can win. Good running backs win you fantasy because there's so many more wide receivers than there are good running backs. That's why I put him over Michael Thomas. And I think Barkley, we saw 2 years ago in 2018, his upside is the RB1. If they need to figure out a good coach, because I think the system, they were trying to figure out what they had in Daniel Jones, so I think they were throwing the ball a little more than they wanted to. And I think they kind of find a good balance at the end of the year to how to run the ball and throw the ball very effectively. So I think he's a safe bet for top 3 running back next year.
Number 1, I think we both have the same one. It's pretty obvious. Christian McCaffrey, 1,000 yards rushing and receiving. He had the second most fantasy points in a season ever. He had a lot of receptions. I think he almost had 100, maybe 100. But he's pretty much an obvious number 1 choice.
Yeah. As you said, 1,000 yards rushing, 1,000 yards receiving, consistency. He had 1 game under 10, 2 games under 20. I mean, who wouldn't take that? He had lots of receptions. He had 141 targets. I mean, that's more than most receivers get. And I saw a thing. I think he had more rushing yards than Le'Veon Bell and someone else, and he had more receptions than Tyler Lockett and other people. That's a lot of. You can't say that about most running backs because that gives you more points than anyone else. And then the one thing that I would say his production might go down is because if Norv Turner is not brought back as the O coordinator or even the head coach, I don't think he'll do as good because Norv Turner likes to call so many passes. I mean, he throws the ball out of the backfield better than anyone to any running back. So that's why I think he's not going to be as good next year, but he's still the number 1 player in the fantasy football league.
Okay, well, that was our top 10. Leave in the comments who you think we got wrong or who you think would put in your top 10. I hope you guys come back to our channel. This is our first video, so hopefully we can make more. Thanks for watching.